Jack B. Yeats, The Outsider, is the title of a major exhibition of the artist's work, which opens at the Model in Sligo tomorrow. It's the largest survey exhibition of Yeats's work in Ireland in almost 40 years, and the exhibition is curated by Brian O'Doherty and Emer McGarry. Brian O'Doherty joins me now from our Sligo studio. Brian, you actually knew Jack B. Yeats personally. Tell us about that.
You know, it's a funny thing. I've just about reached the age that he was when I knew him. So I'm now one of the last people, I suppose, who knew Jack Yeats. That happens to you. If you live long enough, you become a kind of freakish phenomenon, you know, say, oh, he knew Jack Yeats. Indeed, I did. And a grand fellow he was.
Were you a young artist at that time, or were you still a doctor?
I was a young medical student. And I was, of course, an artist already. Against the family's will, but that's another story. I would go there to Portobello, the house at Portobello, and I just called the matron first. They were very protective of him, and she'd talk to him, and he'd give you a time, and up you'd go, and there he'd be sitting in his dressing gown by the open window, a little round table in front of him, and on the table a bottle of sherry, and he'd pour you a glass of sherry. And he talked about everything. He talked about George Bernard Shaw, about John Billington Synge, about his dealer Victor Waddington. Everyone streamed into that talk of his, and it was a stream, like his novels. You know, they go on and on and on. And the paintings are like a great narration. You know, he's telling this story again and again all over. Conflict, the country ways, circuses, the city. Jack saw and did everything. He was like a great reporter. He had his eye open all the time.
He had his eye open, certainly, when it came to the paintings. How big is this exhibition that we're going to see?
40. That's a big show. And some of them have never been seen before. It's hard to put it together, you know, because people don't want to give up their paintings. But I tell you, Sean, let's talk about Jack Yeats' character in a way, because he was a political man. Not in any aggressive way, but he believed in what he believed. He was against the treaty. He was very much the opposite of the poet, very much the opposite of the brother, who was rather grand and who talked about the people and represented the people. We Irish. Well, Jack talked about people. He was down home. He was a regular fella. And he always had his heart in the right place, which was to the left, may I say. And he was responsible to that vision when it made him an outsider, when he was an outsider as an Anglo-Irishman, when he was an outsider in his old age, because he was disillusioned with politics, who isn't these days, God knows, and he was always, as it were, a little on the wrong side, which was the right side
to be on.
And that's why Emer McGarry has caught my good wishes and attention, because she said, I want to talk to you about Jack the Outsider.
In terms of what we see in the exhibition, it's almost like two sections, the early works and then the works post-1930, just to put that as a dividing point. Is there something more personal about the earlier stuff, where we get very much a realistic representation of the ordinary man, in fact, in Ireland in lots of the paintings? That's
a good division. He's more the reporter in the early work. He's there at the Liffey Swim. He's there at the circuses. He's there everywhere. He's walking around Stephen's Green. He's always present. You know, Jack is, who is the fictional self that is behind the work. Then later, as you very truly point out, he becomes a visionary, and that vision sometimes is inspired. That vision sometimes suffers an excessive force that it kind of chokes itself. So he was always an individual. He was always pursuing his own, even in his old age, his own view of the artist's role. And part of that role for him was to bear witness.
Was the politics always present in both of those times and eras of his work?
Yes, he had a bit of a depression. He was very close to events, of course. Think of what he lived through. He lived through 16. He lived through the Revolution. He lived through the Civil War, which broke his heart. And he had a bad phase, turned to writing quite a lot there in the late teens. And so it's an interesting thing. Every, I think, very creative and a person of distinction at some point I think, goes through a down phase, a phase where the world falls apart. And then you put it together again. That's part of, you create a new self to create the new world that you're going to make.
You have published a major essay on Jack B. Yeats as part of this new exhibition. How much of a labour of love was that for you?
Well, it was sort of divided for me. I wrote an awful lot about him when I was young. I went to all these great exhibitions that happened every 2 years at Victor Waddington's, and I wrote very positively about him because I was cutting my young teeth on a great artist, and I was thrilled to have one in my own backyard. But now, 40, 50 years later, if I have to be honest to my own view, a critical view, if we put it that way, I have to make distinctions. And there are things that perhaps you might say he painted too much. And that I think of Edward Hopper, if you know Edward Hopper's work, which I'm sure you do. He also painted things that I would be very unhappy with now. But then how many great paintings do you want? Are 40 great paintings enough? I think if you do 15 great paintings in your life, if you do one, you've changed the world a little bit.
You spoke to Jack B. Yeats as a young medical student, and art still very much to the fore in your life at that time. Now that you've compared yourself to him in terms of age at any rate, what advice would you give to the young medical student who wants to be the artist who might come and speak to you?
Stay with the medicine. It's a hard life, you know. The artist's life is tough, and I won't go beyond saying that you have your ups and downs, and it's a harsh world, and I've been fortunate. But I bought my way in terms of, as every artist does, as everyone does, even if you're an accountant or whatever you are, through toil and pain and disruption and triumph and all that sort of stuff.
Are you working on anything at the moment then?
Oh, indeed I am. I'm working on a commission for Falls Road in Belfast, because I'm not going to go into that part of my life, but I was asked to mark the Falls Road, which I think is a great honour, with an artwork, so I'm going to do that.
When might we see that?
Well, they're starting with it now, so it should be, well, they should have it done a couple of months, I'd say, Sean.
You're also giving a talk tomorrow night prior to the opening, Brian, along with Dr. Hilary Pyle. What will you be talking about?
Well, she's the one who has written most brilliantly and about Jack Yeats, in my view. She has done the work. We all stand on her shoulders. She did great things. And I'm not sure that's always acknowledged, but here's an interesting point. I did a drawing of Jack Yeats in those last days in Portobello. I said, "Can I draw you?" And he said, "Yes." So he sat there with his head down, and I had one shot at it, and I had my pencil, and I'd brought a piece of paper. So I did it. I got lucky, Sean, because when you only get one chance, that's it. So he said, "Can I see it?" I said, "Of course you can." And he didn't say a word. So I brought it over to the National Gallery to show Tom McGreevy, who was the director of the National Gallery at that time, and I was more or less a protege of his. And on the way up, I showed it to one of the guards. Now, they're the fellows that see everything. One of the guards, you know.
Yeah.
One of them, and I said, "Do you know who that is?" "Oh, he said it's a dead image of him." Now, that was triumph. So anyway, time went by, and everybody wanted that drawing. I could have sold it 1,000 times. I said, "I don't want to sell it," until I said it should be in the National Gallery in Dublin. So I gave it to the National Gallery in honour of Hilary Pyle, so that her name always has to be on the label.
And how suitable that the two of you should be speaking then tomorrow night. Jack B. Yeats, The Outsider, opens tomorrow night, runs until June the 5th, and for further details log on to themodel.ie.